We also have 8 people on the thing. Me and Art, we only have 8 mics, so I'll have to share with Teri here. Art can share.
I need a fucking microphone.
You'll need a throat lozenge if you do talk that.
Is this the Roland Bar Mitzvah I'm supposed to sing?
Yes.
So you working?
Wow. I don't know. Does everybody know who these people are, or should we introduce?
I have no idea.
Oh, so you've all walked past them and said hello this weekend. That's very nice of you.
That's right, it is.
This is actually the 3rd time we've done. We did Chainsaw in 2004, added people in 2009, and then it took us 14 years to add a couple more. But here we are now, and we pretty much got everybody. Ed Gunn, yes, he could have been here. I wanted him here. He's a fun old bird, and his manager called me, I don't know, maybe 10 days or 2 weeks ago, and I told him the truth. I said, I hate to quote my father, but you're a day late and a dollar short. I couldn't get him there if I wanted him to, so Ed would have been here. But I get a call from his manager who said, yeah, Ed, Neal, and Teresa told me I should call you. When? 6 months ago, right? Not today. So, yeah, poor Ed's not here. But we are all here. And we just watched the Lou documentary, Perryman documentary. A lot of, no one has seen it. I told a couple little few stories, but Kim, real fast before we, I would like to know what made you, I know you knew Lou forever, but what made you say, man, he would make an interesting subject for a documentary?
Well, actually, he told me a story once about, he drove a cab in Austin for many years, and he told me a story about that process, and he was always gaming the system, and Lou would never leave anything alone. So it was an intriguing tale, and I thought, well, I might make an interesting little short piece. So I drove up to his house one evening and turned the camera on, and he didn't shut up for 5 hours. After that, I knew I had more than a taxi cab tale to tell, so that's how it got started.
Yeah, I found him a very interesting guy myself, and funny, naturally funny fella too. And, but yeah, I just figured, in Lou's death, I was, kind of a shock here at Wasteland. We covered that because he got killed before, just the day before we had the second reunion, and it kind of, we got a call here at the show from his daughter on late Friday night. Pam got a call because we had, our cell number, and it was by Saturday morning. We were like, fuck. Because everyone was gone, they were here, and then all of a sudden we're getting the news in Cleveland on Friday. It's like, damn. So that kind of put a weird mood on that show.
Yeah,
very
much.
Yeah, well, I remember him fondly. So, that, like they say, you're never really dead as long as somebody remembers you.
Do we have time for just a quick Lou Perryman story?
I was going to ask if anybody had a Lou Perryman story.
I must share with you the best Lou Perryman story of all time and why he's in our hearts forever. We were doing a show in New Jersey, and a wonderful show. And Betsy Palmer was right there, and we had Elvira, and it was wonderful. And we were in a room about half this size, and they had rooms down the hall where all the celebrities were. And we're in New Jersey, and the 2 guys from New Jersey stick their head in the door. They want to see who's in the room, so if they want to go in the room and get some autographs. So, oh no, there's nobody in here. Lou Perryman leaps on top of the table, and screams at the top of the, nobody's in here, ass wipes! Betsy Palmer goes, he's my hero. What did Elvira say? Elvira said,
Anybody else with a fast Lou Perryman story? We can wrap that up and move on.
Yeah, I got one.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, a favorite of mine was, Teri knows, we were in the van and forever it seemed, and occasionally Lou would be in there with us. Usually it was just the three of us, right, and the actors. One time I remember Lou in there. Toby was not big on acknowledging good, bad, indifference. It was just next shot, okay, movie, come on, we gotta go. And Lou would be in there and he would always, you do something, good job. You know, very encouraging, very like, yeah.
Every time.
Yeah,
Lou
and it was
was right there.
wonderful to get that feedback, so that's my favorite Lou story.
Can we talk about Paul Partain being in character on set and how he would go out of his way to try to irritate people in character?
Can I run with that?
Yeah. Paul Partain, gotta love him. One of the sweetest men I ever known. But I got there, they'd been shooting for 2 weeks by the time I got from Chicago. It wasn't, not like a walk from Chicago, but by the time I came down from Chicago to Austin, and Kim picked me up at the airport like 7 o'clock in the morning. He says, you wanna go to your apartment and get some rest? Or I said, no, take me out to the set. So we go out there, it's like that, what is the name of that road? Quick Hill?
Yeah.
Out to Quick Hill, and there was some, Lou and some of the crew were setting up some dolly track, and there, Paul was sitting in his wheelchair with his shoes sewn together, so just went like that, and he had a conversation nook set up out of folding chairs, like in a U shape all around him, like we were all gonna sit and chat between shots and something. And he was sitting all alone, and the rest of the cast is sitting on equipment cases over here. And I didn't realize till later they all hated him. So he was just looking, dying for somebody to talk to, you know. It was like, when he found, he goes, hey, sign on over here, partner, grab a drink. And he had this enormously long, like a 63 or 64 white Cadillac convertible with red leather interior, tops down. It's got fins like that long, pointy, like if you're riding a bicycle behind it and the guy slammed on the brakes, you'd just impale, you know. And the trunk was open. He says, grab yourself something to drink. I said, oh, okay. And it was all filled with Coca-Cola and Tall Boys of Budweiser. I thought, well, shit, I've been up all night. I grabbed a Budweiser and sat down, and we became fast friends, just started talking and just never stopped. I enjoyed the man. But, boy, he was something I just loved watching him act. You know, I couldn't take my eyes off him. He was so intense about it, and that was the day where he did they were in the old house, you know, where he does that thing. Come on, Frank, let's go be a fun tree. Having more fun today? I don't think I can take it. And then he tries to wheel out of that room, and it was like I think it had been like a screen-in porch at one point or something that had wooden floors that were all rotted. His wheelchair fell half through it, trying to get and he just kept going, and Daniel kept rolling, and he got out of that thing, and on his way, and I think he did this on purpose to add a little something to it, on his way out through the door, he hits the door jamb and mashes his hand. And honestly, in retrospect, I think he got an idea at the last minute just to add to this thing. Absolutely, because that's kind of accurate it was. I keep a picture of him in my money bag. He goes with me every convention.
Let me go back to the beginning here. We've talked a lot of, a couple reunions we haven't talked a lot, but since we have Kim here, I'd like to go all the way back to the beginning of TCM. There's like so many little stories about what was the inspiration for it, from Ed Gein to Toby Hooper saw, in a crowded store at Christmas, saw Chainsaw in the background. Can you fill us in and let us know, the true inspiration? How did everything really, really begin on that?
Well, Toby and I started talking about doing a film sometime after we wrapped Eggshells. And we really developed what the basic structure of Chainsaw is that you see today. It was really based structurally on Hansel and Gretel. And so that was our basic storyline, or through line through the script. But the times we lived in, those were the inspiration. Ed Gein, of course, filled in some background inspiration too. But there was some murders that occurred in Houston. I think they called them the Candyman murders with Elmer Wayne Henley. And that was happening really the summer of '73. So we sort of incorporated elements of those characters into the script as well. Anything more?
No. I was just I was sorry. I was being patient and listening for once. But so once you had the basic story down, did the screenplay just kind of flow?
No, originally we had a disagreement, Toby and I, about what would be in that house, and part of what Toby originally envisioned in that house was sort of an electronic presence, something that lacked actual physical substance, that was not human. And I felt very strongly that what was really scary we're looking at in the mirror. So, we went back and forth there on that subject for some time, and we actually sort of dropped the ball. We didn't do anything for quite a year, and then about a year later, Toby called me up and he said, "Okay, here's what we do." And basically, he come around to human occupants in the house and the character of Leatherface, the big brutish character. And we really just sat down at night. He lived across the railroad tracks from where I lived, and I'd get home from work. I was working as an illustrator at the time. And I'd get home from work, go home, get something to eat, chill a minute, and I'd walk over to Toby's. I could actually walk across Mopac in Austin. If any of you guys familiar with Austin, it's just some railroad tracks in the old days, but it's a freeway now. But I could walk right across there, and we just worked until 2 o'clock in the morning. And I think once we actually sat down, we cranked out first draft in about 6 weeks. We went to town. Yeah, we sat down and talked through every aspect of the script before I put words on page, and I'd go off into the kitchen where there was a little typewriter on the dining room table, and I would clack out half a dozen pages and bring them back into Toby. And our criteria was that I could keep him chuckling we were on the right path. So we always thought, that there was a very humorous aspect to it. That was part of it from the get-go. We realized that did not come through for some time because of the intensity of the film, but it is there. All right?
Yeah, well, we've got Dan Pearl with us for the first time too. And,
That's very nice of y'all. Thank you very much.
and now we have a screenplay, we have a location, and we have this little farmhouse in August in Texas, and it's really it's a tight, claustrophobic film, which makes it even more frightening. But what I wanted to ask Dan was, it was basically your first film. Did you get did Toby just say, "Well, show me what you got"?
Well, I'd gone to film school at the University of Texas at Austin, and they told us you couldn't get in the film business. It's never going to happen for you. If you love filmmaking, you'll go on and get a master's degree, and you'll teach, and if you're lucky, you'll get a grant and you'll make films on the weekends and the summers. So I bought into that and went to graduate school. At that time, I was basically like the staff cinematographer for the film school, undergraduate school. When I went to graduate school, I shot all the films for those guys. So I probably had about 4 or 5 hours of finished film by the time Toby got around to hiring me. The way that happened, that came about, I only just learned this maybe about a year ago. A guy named Larry Carroll, who was an editor, Toby wanted to hire him as an editor. And Larry, he used to direct training films for the Texas Department of Public Safety, basically the Texas State Police, that I used to shoot. And one of the films that we made was a drug bust. And the point of this drug bust for the training was that you're gonna bust into the room, and there's gonna be half a dozen people in there, and one of them's gonna try and get the drugs to the toilet to flush them. So it's the whole thing they're rehearsing is coming in there, slamming everybody against the wall or the floor, and chasing that one guy to the toilet to tackle him and get the drugs before he does it. So we shot this very, bam, 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 boom, boom, very sketchily lit, camera whipping around like crazy. And I guess Larry must have showed it to Toby in the course of landing a job, and Toby decided that that's the cameraman I need to shoot this film.
Wow, that's great. But when did you yourself then get in there? We all know the story about the amazingly hot, stinky farmhouse shooting. But while shooting in there, did you, basically it was squeezy, the room. It's not a huge place.
It was not huge. It was already hot. It was Texas in July, August. It's already over 100 degrees. And it was mandated, for those of you who are a little bit technical, we're gonna shoot 16 millimeter, but they wanted to have a 35 millimeter blow up in the theaters. So it was mandated that I had to shoot on the finest grain 16 millimeter film that would blow up the best. Those of you who know ASA and ISO, it was 25, which is 16 times less light sensitive than cameras are today. So that also adding to the heat. I have inside the dinner scene at night, the scene that we shot 27 hours that day. Yeah, those light bulbs that are in here, they're 500 watt photo floods, and they're so hot, and the head cheese is stinking and rotten. We didn't have extra head cheese. Of course, we didn't think we were going 27 hours that day either, so we didn't have anything. But I gotta say that the situation was miserable often, but I think it comes across the screen.
Oh, yeah.
No, I'm serious. I'm serious about that. If you sit, now here it is 50 years later. I've been on a few shoots now, and when everybody's happy and having a good time, this doesn't usually generate a great film. You have to suffer for our art, and so we certainly did on this one.
How many times did you have to stop filming because someone had a ball and say, "Hey, I got a puke or something"?
I have what?
How many times did you have to stop filming because an important cast member in the shot had a puke or something?
Ed may know the answer to that.
Which one?
He's talking about if they were puking during the dinner scene, if the people got so violently ill from the smell of it.
All I know is I turned to Toby and I said, "Who do I have to sleep with to get off this film?" Toby, like he always did, said, "What?" No, people, who took the nausea shots? Was that Marilyn? The doctor came in and gave a nausea shot?
I think so.
I think it was Marilyn who actually had a physical nausea shot because they, in a real movie, you have a $280,000 plastic forming machine and you make whatever you need, and then the airbrush guy comes in and they make 20 of them in case you need them. In low budget movie making, you go and buy real meat and you put it on the plate, and then 27 hours later, with Mr. Danny's lights, the meat is simmering. Not because it's on a hot plate, because it's on your plate. And the fumes are coming from the plate here. I'm like this. Toby's on the other side of the camera talking to Jay Parson. He goes, "Wow, Ed's doing really well. He is so on it tonight." Motherfucker, I can't do nothing else.
Adding to the heat situation, I should mention, is that it's 27 hours, so some of it's night, some of it's day. It's supposed to be night in the film. We have to black out all the windows. So now the sun's hitting the black, which is heating up even more, and there's no ventilation. So it was just the worst possible situations.
Like I did, I just turned to John and said, if you were buried under makeup the whole time.
A lot of makeup.
Well, you know, when we, you know, he'd say, okay, we're gonna reset, cool the lights and all that stuff. And I don't know if anybody else remembers this, but there was an old white box fan in the corner with a little white, and, you know, and the cord had cat shit all along. From all the cats that lived in that house with the people who actually lived there. And they, let's cool the lights, and some rip or something was coming and plugged that thing in, and we just sit in the corner going.
John, you know it's all your fault. We had to shoot for 27 hours.
Yeah, well, they're not that far from wrong.
John's mask was created by a plastic surgeon. And there were 3 different sets of them. They were all in parts, but they essentially had to be glued to his face. And we were down to our 3rd and last mask, and that's all we had. So we had to shoot until we got everything with John out of the way.
Yeah.
So it's your fault, John. We're
That being said, on the same subject, this is one question I've never seen asked, and maybe it has been asked. Outside of Apocalypse Now, which was actually filmed in the jungle, the filming conditions you guys went through were probably about the same. But was there ever one scene, one day, no matter how much you shot, how much you put into it, it's like, okay, I'm going home? Did that thought ever come through anybody?
No. It wasn't the same at all. I moved troops through triple canopy jungle in Vietnam easier than shooting good imagery.
So it's pretty well known that on the premises, on the property where the house was located, there was a pretty substantial marijuana grow operation going on. But allegedly, you were all very well behaved, except for on a day that's been referred to as, quote, Brownie Day by various people involved in the production. Can anyone tell us about what happened on Brownie Day?
Well, I'll start by telling you, on the second day of shooting at the house, a guy named Rocky, I believe his name was. Yeah, Rocky. He comes to me, he goes, you seem like somebody who knows what's going on. You guys are supposed to be out of here like tomorrow, and trucks, more and more stuff is coming every day. I go, they told you 3 days. I said, we're here 3 weeks, man. He goes, what? 3 weeks? He goes, well, I guess I better tell y'all, I got 2 acres of marijuana growing back here. And just, please, don't take any off the property. If y'all want to have any, here on the property, that's fine. But for God's sake, don't take any off the property. I'm going to tell a story. One day, we were driving away. We were all in the van. We all ride together. And Toby's walking along. We wear a bush jacket often, right? So we're all, hey, honking, we're waving. Hey, Toby. He lifts his arm up to wave, and the biggest baggie you've ever seen. But the marijuana brownies, yeah. The brownies, Ted Nicolau is a great friend of mine. I met him when we were 18 years old. We started making films together, and I was fortunate to be able to bring him on as a sound mixer on Chainsaw. And because it's a very family thing. My wife became the makeup artist. His wife became the caterer, and she didn't decide not to tell anybody one day, but she decided it'd be fun if she made some marijuana brownies. Right? And that day, that's the day that it's the day that Leatherface comes back to the house, right, where he cuts up the door, comes through the thing, right? You know, when your brother did that damn thing in the door, right? Anyhow, Toby and I, we finished eating our dinner, the main part of the dinner. We had to go figure out what we were doing. So we got up and left. We didn't have any dessert, but everybody else ate the brownies, right? So Toby and I and Gunnar was out of his head, right? But the 3 of us basically carried on shooting the film, but the whole rest of the crew was laying around all places laughing and laid out and stuff. So it was a pretty bizarre thing.
Gunnar turns to me and goes, I can't feel my legs. He'd never had a brownie in his whole life.
There's nothing.
He was a big man, he had a rather big appetite, he ended up having 2 of them without, you know, he dosed himself pretty.
Was good shit.
Too high, you're just a beggar.
So some of you didn't see Gunnar made up as Leatherface until your scenes were shot. Is that legend or is that truth?
No, that's true. Toby did it on purpose to, so we would have that moment when we finally saw him, and it worked. It worked. It was quite frightening the first time I saw it.
I wonder how much human flesh was used to make the mask.
What's interesting about that concept is actually absolutely true, and that was both Toby and Gunnar's idea that they didn't want anybody to see him before. So consequently, Gunnar hung out with us, the crew, right? Because he didn't want the actors to see him, so he spent a lot of his time with us. There's actually a picture of him helping push the dolly back to 1. And we're shooting Maryland at night, and I only figured this out a few months ago. I'm going, wait a second. I look at the picture, I go, okay, that's Lynn, the dolly grip. There's me on the dolly. Holy shit, that's Gunnar. Pushes. He's in the apron. He's pushing the dolly back to 1.
In conclusion, actually, that was, I think, the time that I felt I did the most acting. And if you see some of the reviews of the movie, when they talk about me, you know I wasn't an actor. But I said for this particular scene, I'd like to sit on the porch and I'd like to be blindfolded. And so when I see Leatherface, it's going to be really my first time. So it took me about 15, 20 minutes, and I worked myself up into a lather. And then they yelled action, and I go into the vestibule or whatever, and then into the kitchen. I see the hook, see the freezer. I open the freezer. She pops out, and I let out a scream, and I tore out of the place. And Toby yells, "Cut." He comes over and he says, "Alan, that's a great scream, but you gotta wait for him to get into the frame." And actually it took, I think, a couple of more takes, and actually Lou Perryman, I think, was a grip on that, and they got behind me and pulled me down by my belt loops, just as that hammer comes down on my head. And we're talking 50 years later, I'm still getting headaches. Anyway, that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, Teri, you'll forever be known as the girl on the meat hook. But I like the fact that haven't you said before that you really never saw your demise. Haven't you ever said, well, she could have escaped?
When I first came out, Bill and I came out together at Monster Mania, and everybody kept coming up, and we were overwhelmed. We had never, dreamed of this happening in our lives. And they would say to me, "I always wondered what happened to Pam." And they said it over and over and over, and I realized, the last time you see her, she pops out of the deep freeze, and she looks very alive,
You just get stuff back.
Yeah. And so eventually, I had heard it so much, I thought, well, maybe she lived. So I wrote these stories, Pam Lives, and I wrote part 1 and snuck it on Facebook, timidly. And everybody, the phone lines lit up, and everybody loved it, and I thought, okay, so I wrote part 2. And in part 2, I get into how we got this old broken down, Pa and, hitchhiker. I named him Jed, I believe. And I said, they went and picked up that freezer, and you get a whole description of the family and how they're pinned and everything. So it was quite surprising, but the thing you have to realize is that if you tell an actor that you care about their character, you can make them cry, because it's very meaningful. So that was a relief.
That's nice and interesting. I just knew you'd continue to.
Teri, no, seriously, how much have you been offered for the red shorts?
A lot.
A lot.
A lot. Everybody wants that and the bathing suit.
Have you washed them? Yeah.
I haven't seen them since the day I left the set, so somebody got rich on those shorts.
Or they went into that pile of what they burned in the bathroom because they were
You
like,
didn't,
whoa, no.
you
I'm
didn't
not-
secretly find them, did you, Ed?
They're a little snug.
He's wearing them now.
Now that makes sense.
Roger, you sitting there down all alone for a minute.
One
Go ahead,
thing,
man.
I think I said, the shorts were the inspiration for the famous dollar shop.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Which I will remind Daniel that they didn't mention was coming up until Dottie was, keeping me occupied putting on my makeup, freshening it up, and I knew I was supposed to go sit in the swing. And there I look over and I see Daniel under the swing with his camera. And I said to Dottie, I said, Dottie, what's Daniel doing under the swing with the camera? And she said,
Oh, he's always there.
yeah, so I started getting a little worried, that was gonna be not good for me. And I knew that my cheeks were showing, and
They
so
sure were.
Daniel, thank you.
I started, and I didn't realize that they'd had so much trouble before I came on the set with the producers, that they were gonna shut them down and all this stuff. And so I proceeded to tell Toby, I said, no, I'm not gonna do this, I'm just not. And finally, Toby, his words were, goddamn it, Teri, we're gonna shoot all around it. And no, all around it. So I kind of acquiesce and I sit down in the swing, and when I went to see the film in Tomball, Texas, where it was showing, when I had my eyes covered, because I knew it was coming up, and there it was, my cheeks in widescreen, Technicolor, and that's what scared me. You think Leatherface? No, this was, my mother and my Aunt Jerry might see this. Fortunately, they never did.
So once the movie was released, it was a huge phenomenon quickly. Were you all recognized, the cast members, in public at any point?
I have a story about that.
I did not start getting, what's the word, recognized, until I started coming out on the road and signing autographs and things like that, obviously. I had been recognized before that, and it had to be a super, super, unbelievable super fan to know what I looked like, So, there, that's it.
Bill?
Oh, I moved to New York after I did the movie, and to become a true thespian. Anyway, and I also smoked at the time, like a chimney. And one night I ran out of smokes, and I lived in the village, and I decided I had to go out. It was late, so a lot of places were closed, and so I just started walking to, find a delicatessen or something open with cigarettes. And I'm walking, and right south of where I lived was the NYU school near Washington Square Park. And I turn a corner, and there's really nobody out. It's really late. And I see three kids, kind of younger people, walking towards me, and I said, okay. And they didn't look too dangerous, so I'm not too worried. And they walked past me, and one person said, yeah, it's him. And I said, what? Him what? And they went, the guy from Chainsaw. and they are beside themselves. And I hear this, I thought, maybe they've got cigarettes. I turn back around and go up to them, and they go, "It's Harry Kim," and they're all beside themselves, and they're shaking with excitement. And I'm like, this is weird. But have you got a cigarette? I'm really jonesing for a smoke. Oh, sure, here, have 5. Have a whole pack. And they were NYU film students. And the thing was, this was right in the new year, he goes, "You won't believe it, man, but we all gave each other meat hooks as Christmas presents." And I went, "Cool, thanks for the smoke."
Awesome story. Drop the mic.
I think I got Okay, cool.
Watching poor John get it hysterically emotional. I was like, yeah, you were more fun to watch. Sorry about that. Don't mean to. Wait a minute. I had a question for Roger. Let's change this around a little bit. Well, while I remember my question. There's not a whole lot of music in Saw. There's some grunts, noises. So when your song, the original song shows up, you notice it's there. Now, how does, and you've had songs show up in other films and productions. Was it your production company that just sort of sold you the film, the song, or was it you that personally did it, or how did it actually wind up there?
Well, Toby went around to all the recording studios around Austin looking for music. And he happened to go to the studio that I recorded that song in, a place called Hill on the Moon, that Jim Inman owned. His brother John Inman was guitar player for Jerry Jeff Walker. And at that time, Austin was a magical place. The creativity just flowed down the streets. There was musicians, actors, filmmakers, artists, everything. It was just a magical place to be. And we'd gone out to Hill on the Moon, and it was like 7 stoned hippies, singing into a TIAC 4-track tape recorder, a 1/4-inch tape recorder, and we
All
just
males too.
all males, all males. And, we just happened to have a spontaneous event that even to this day, last year I got like 400,000 streams of Fool for a Blonde. In I think the year 2000 or 2001, Jerry Jeff Walker, I moved from Austin to New York City, and I hadn't seen any of those guys for, 20 years. And so Jerry Jeff Walker's band was playing at the Bowery Ballroom. And I went down there to see them, and I just got married to a beautiful blonde girl. And we were standing out, there was no audience seats, so everybody was standing. And I don't really stand out in a crowd, when there's a lot of tall people around. So, in the middle of the show after a song, Jerry Jeff looked out in the crowd, hadn't seen me for 20 years, and said, "Roger Bartlett, Fool for a Blonde." And I was like, whoa. So, I talked to Toby one time. I've been trying to get a soundtrack album made for 50 years now, and Toby always had plans for the score, and my phone rang one day, and Toby was there. I said, "Hello?" He said, "Roger, it's Toby." And the phone number was unlisted. We got plans for that score. I was like, "Well, Toby, it's been 40 years. Are your plans coming to fruition soon?" So even to this day, we're still trying to get a soundtrack album made, and you know, I you know, thank the universe for the day that song got into that movie, because it's been just a wonderful thing to have, you know, in my career.
I think a wonderful thing to have is when you ask somebody about Saw, it seems like everybody who had some involvement with it has a story to tell about it. And you know, it could be funny, it could be a little tragic and smelly, or it just everybody. It seems like anybody I've ever run into, and I've been doing this, you know, as a gig and doing shows and running into people for 35 years. And it's funny how everybody from Saw has had there's very few films where everybody seems to have a story. When you think about it, some people are like, yeah, I slung some cables and got a paycheck. I ate a lot of hamburgers. But you do. I mean, it's...
Well, you know, Austin in that period of time was just a magical place. You know, just so many good things. Bill and I talked about some of the wonderful things we remembered from Austin just the other day. So it was really
talking about you know, the whole Saw experience. Is there anyone on the panel at all that has that, you know, a couple of these stories brought up that you've never told before? Like, you know, you've been asked a million questions, probably done a million interviews, and dozens and dozens of things like this since your first one. But right now, sitting on the panel, is anything popped into your head that you've never been asked and say, hey, or a silly story?
Well, there's a couple, but
never
can't
told?
do it because the husband's is still alive.
Yeah. Don't want a felony?
No.
I got a story for you all since nobody else volunteered. Toby, as we're getting close to making the film, and in fact, when he called me, he goes, I'm making this film, it's going all Texans. So right away, me being from New Jersey, suddenly sound more Texan than normal, because I wanted a job badly. But the one person, he always said, the one person that's coming from Hollywood is the makeup artist, right? And there's a very bizarre thing that before he met Teri, he actually asked my wife to play the part of Pam. Totally wrong casting. Teri's the perfect person to play that part. Right? And she played it well. But anyhow, my ex-wife, but she said at the time, I don't want to be an actress. If I'm going to be anything, I want to be a makeup artist. Toby goes, no, that's the person that's coming from Hollywood, right? So I had to do a lens test, and I'm using her as a subject. She's a beautiful woman. I'm using her as a subject for the lens test. She says, can I do a horror, will you give me an hour and a half? I want to do a horror job on myself. She took the shell of a hard-boiled egg, drew veins on it, put it over her eye, took a dried apricot, opened that up, filled it in, and made like her eye socket was now bulging out with this dull white behind it. She was working for a dentist, so she'd already had Leatherface's filed teeth made. She already had those, right? And then she took raisins and cut them in half the long way and mixed up blood. Now, how in 1973 she knew how to mix blood without the internet to tell her? I don't know how she did it, but she mixed up film blood and made these oozing scabs. So now I go, Toby, I need you to come see the test. He goes, just tell me the lens is any good or not. I go, well, I don't know, I can't, trying to get him to go to the screening. And he goes, no, I can't tell about this one. I just need you to help me. So he goes and we put up the thing, and she's looking beautiful, and all of a sudden, bam, the next cut, it's a horror job. He goes, oh my God, and hires her right there on the spot. And I want to say one other thing about her, she did a hell of a job, and one other thing about this woman, she's quite amazing. She's the first woman in the makeup union. She broke the union.
This lovely woman that he talked to you about the raisins, she cut the raisin in half with a scalpel so it's flat. She puts it on my face. She uses a woman's blush, puts that around, and does a little hypodermic needle thing to lay the blood in the tracks. So I thought it would be vaguely amusing if I turned to the cast and pull it off. The spirit gum comes with it like real skin. then I eat it. Toby goes, ow, like a little girly man. Okay, you gotta put that in film. He goes, no.
I'm surprised you didn't encourage it.
No, he didn't want to use it. I think he said, it's too much. I turned to him and said, it's too much? We got people hanging from the rafters on hooks. People taking in alien with a Supreme board and this is... Sorry. I gotta get back to the home.
You got something, Mark? We hit a standstill. I was listening. See if somebody else has a question, maybe? Hold on, Eric. We'll get you next. Go ahead, Dan. I saw you first.
It's well known in horror history that there's been a bunch of films loosely based on the Ed Gein history and tale. Now, back when Texas Chainsaw was made in '74, filmed in '73, there was a film called